Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com. Purposely Equipped, an exploration of the Nicene Creed.
Continuing our look at the Nicene Creed. Over 1,700 years, it has been a source of agreement amongst all Christians, and we've gone through this series. We're getting toward the end, and you can tell Barry Crane, my pastor, is quite a historian, so really leaning on his perspective on these different things. And we're up to the point in the Creed where it mentions, we acknowledge one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. So why was baptism mentioned in the Creed, and we'll talk about it, and not communion, for instance?
Yeah, baptism was really important. It was a part of what we sometimes call conversion initiation in the church. And for those who were adults who were coming into the faith, we can talk about infant baptism as well if you wish to, but primarily for first-generation Christians and adults ever since, that which marked their entrance into the Christian faith was baptism. It appears in the New Testament, you may recall in Acts, how Philip baptized the Ethiopian eunuch. He didn't understand the prophet Isaiah, and having it explained to him by Philip, he said, well, here's water. Why can't I be baptized? And he was baptized immediately. In the history of the church, however, there was a evolution of a long period of being what they called a catechumen, who went through a process to prepare them for baptism. In fact, it seems in the early church, maybe partly because of persecution, this entry rite was very important because they didn't want people who weren't true followers of Jesus seeping into the congregation. And so to some extent, you actually had to show you had a changed life before you were baptized and came into the church. So baptism was important. And as a part of North Sound, our congregation, Mark, you know that before our communion service, our Eucharist, I will often say something like, this is not the table of North Sound Church. This is the Lord's table, and we are open to any Christian. However, if you are a baptized Christian, a follower of Jesus, we invite you to join us in this. I recently had a question from a lady who is not yet a Christian who said, can I take communion? And I said, well, in one way, we leave it up to an individual, but in another sense, baptism is the introduction into the Christian faith. It marks you as a follower of Jesus.
Yeah. The association between baptism and the forgiveness of sins, why do you think these two are coupled right there?
Well, that raises a question that's a whole lot more time-consuming than what we have time for, which has to do with whether baptism is a symbolic initiation into the church, or whether there is what we call baptismal regeneration, or in some sense, baptism in and of itself is a regenerative process.
So the ideas of, they just wanted to include the idea of baptism, but as far as expounding on what it means and the implications, they've left that more to history and what Christians want to do.
Yes, but it was vital as a process of what we call conversion initiation. Before baptism, you were not marked as a follower of Jesus Christ. After baptism, you said, I'm a follower of Jesus. And interestingly, Mark, in missions work overseas today, in countries where the culture is not Christian, people can associate with a church and still have a relationship with their loved ones in a different culture, be that Hindu, Muslim, what have you. But when they're baptized, it's a tipping point in those cultures, and often it results in alienation from their families because they've now declared, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ.
So very important to get baptized.
Yes, sir.
Purposely Equipped, an exploration of the Nicene Creed. To hear this discussion again, or to hear other episodes, visit kcisradio.com/morning devotion or purposely.com.